My name is Gopi Warrior. I am the Secretary of Forum for Environment Journalists in India. My day job is as the editor of Monte, India. I start by inviting Mr. Sandeep Chauhan, Secretary of Mumbai Marathi Patrakar Sangh, to felicitate Mr. Pawan Sukhdev. Mr. Sukhdev, you could stay there. Now I invite Mr. Gurbir Singh, President of Mumbai Press Club, to welcome Mr. Sukhdev. Thanks, Gurbir. Yeah, you want to speak?
Yeah. Just two words. We're really happy to have this thing going. A very warm welcome to Pawan Sukhdev. We've been plotting this for some time. Zareen, Samir, the whole family, and Federation, the Forum of Environmental Journalists, they got in touch that we should do something for in Darryl's memory. It was pending for a long time. It's been discussed. So what better occasion, we thought, how to do it. So there were various suggestions. One of them was do a memorial lecture. The other one was whether we should do a fellowship. All that's still in the air. We could even do both. And here's the first one, and it's fantastic that it's taken off on such a high note, because we've heard so much about Pawan Sukhdev. He doesn't come here very often, lives in Switzerland, so it's really fantastic for us to be able to learn something. And for Darryl, I mean, in Darryl's memory, we've all sort of grown up with him. Just a small anecdote. Darryl was the resident editor of Indian Express when I was trying to learn journalism. I was still an independent writer, and we were trying to find out what to do. And sort of within 5 minutes, he sort of saw my interest, and he said, look, there's an agitation going on in Dhanu area, led by the Kashtakari Sangatna and by Kaluram Dhodre, which was Bhumi Sena. So why don't you live there 15 days, 15, 20 days, and see what you can pick up. And that led to a series of about 4 stories. So actually, it was like cutting my teeth. Those were days when, I was just out of MA, and so that's how I got to know Darryl. And Zareen, of course, taught us economics, threw us out of class many times. So we go back a long way in Xavier's, all that. But the fascinating thing is that in terms of environmental journalism, he's the man who put it together. And I hope as a collective alliance, FEJI, Patrakar Sangh, Mumbai Press Club, the family, we can, and the question of cities, the publication, we can all put it all together and see this holds over the next 5 to 10 years at least. And each year we come together and we can evaluate where we stand in terms of environment, and we remember Darryl for all the contribution he's done. Thank you so much for all of you all to be here. Thank you, Gopi.
Thank you, Gurbir. On behalf of FEJI, I request, Kea, you're coming up, or Atul? Atul to give his, felicitate Mr. Sukhdev. Yeah. And I would request Mr. Sukhdev to release Atul's book. It's called Climate Chaos. It's just hot out of the press. And just a word about Atul, if anybody in this house doesn't know Atul. Atul is an independent journalist, author of 14 books, and has been writing on environment development, agriculture, disaster management in English and Marathi, regional newspapers and periodicals. He is a recipient of the Prem Bhatia Memorial Trust Award and the Statesman Rural Reporting Award. He has received fellowships from PANO South Asia to study impacts of climate change, and a fellowship from Ministry of Water Resources offered to study on water-related issues. Atul is former member of Maharashtra State Disaster Management Authority and trustee and joint secretary of FEJI. Thank you. Thank you, Atul. Thank you, Mr. Sukhdev. So now I would request Kea to introduce, Kea Acharya, President of FEJI, to introduce Darryl, FEJI, and the speaker of this evening. Kea.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's a very special event, and we're very, very happy that all of you have taken the trouble to come. My name is Kea Acharya. I head the Forum of Environmental Journalists in India. We're based out of Bangalore currently, but this began by Darryl in 1988 at the behest of UNESCAP, UN Social and Cultural Organization. Okay? Under that, we were all youngsters, and we sort of learned from him. He made it very interesting. We would go on these trips and we'd learn about things like ecosystems, etc., which wasn't even heard of in the papers. And you know, I wasn't in India then. I remember on a flight into East Africa, I had a Times of India newspaper in my hand in the flight, and I saw Darryl's, not name, in the side. I think there was a meeting going on the Forum of Environmental Journalists in India, and he had written meeting at 4 p.m. and at Kenara, his address was there, and I remember thinking that I must follow up with this. And it's strange, after so many years, here I am, I head FEJI, and I've had a lot to do with Darryl, and we still really miss him. Darryl was not just in FEJI, he was, as Gurbir has said, he was the resident editor of the Times of India and Indian Express in Mumbai. In the 70s and 80s, he brought topics on environmental issues into mainstream when it wasn't even heard of. I mean, he was that prescient. And I'm sorry to say, I know it's a little bit of a damper, but we haven't been able to keep up. We've got a lot of youngsters interested, yes, but for them to find space and to push is another big challenge altogether. Okay, that's Darryl and that's us. Now I take great pleasure in introducing Mr. Pavan Sukhdev. Mr. Pavan Sukhdev is a scientist by education and banker by training and an environmental economist by passion. That sounds incredible, actually. And years of work in sustainability and the invisible economics of nature led to his appointment to head the United Nations Green Economy Initiative. We call it TEEB. You know, that's, and to lead the G8+5 study. TEEB is for the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity. I don't know many, still now I don't know many people that know of it or want to speak of it. GDP is so deeply embedded in our psyches to be able to speak of another valuation system, which I'm sure Pavan will tell you about, is not that easy. He was awarded the McCluskey Fellowship in 2011 by Yale. At Yale, he taught a graduate course on TEEB and wrote his book, Corporation 2020, Transforming Business for Tomorrow's World. In this book, he advocates 4 changes in micropolicy and regulation, which can rapidly transform today's corporation to deliver tomorrow's green and equitable economy of permanence. I hope you'll be able to tell us what we should do sitting here in India about that. So anyway, this led to an ongoing campaign at Rio +20, that was in 2012, that means 20 years after the Rio Summit, okay, on transforming business for tomorrow's world. Pavan promotes tomorrow's corporation, Corporation 2020, one with positive rather than negative externalities. As founder and CEO of GIST Impact, correct? GIST Impact, which delivers impact valuation and analytics. Pavan works with asset managers, C-suite executives and senior government officials on transition techniques with an emphasis on metrics for sustainability. Pavan has served on the boards of Conservation International, the Global Reporting Initiative, the Stockholm Resilience Center, and on the TEEB Advisory Board. He's won several awards, including the Blue Planet Prize and the Tyler Prize in 2020. It is indeed a privilege for me and a great honor to be able to welcome Mr. Pavan Sukhdev to give us his keynote address. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your kind words and thank you for your many gifts. I would say too many gifts, in fact, but grateful for them. I'm going to speak about the invisible economics of nature, which is a topic, in fact, that I still remember when we had published. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Sorry, somebody will have to help me find the presentation that I'm doing here. I still remember when we started the project called TEEB, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. One of the first calls that I got was actually from India, and it was Darryl. And he started to introduce himself, and I said, I know who you are, it's okay, don't have to do that. And then we talked about a topic which he found interesting, and my first of many conversations that we had on that subject. I remember his energy, I remember his positivity and optimism, you know, that no matter what is happening, we must carry on, we must, I think, as you also narrated, someone who is always looking for the opportunity to get things done, rather than fretting about what is not being done. And I think that's the real spirit of the man that I felicitate and do remember well. Sorry, can someone help me with this? I'm not a great technologist, contrary to what people think, but someone will have to help me log into this and get the... Oh, there we are, okay. It seems to be working now. So when we talk about, we'll need to pull down the lights, otherwise we may not see the images. Yeah. Oops, not yet. No, it's not working. Yeah. I'm sorry? Okay, yeah. I see, okay, yeah. Well, let me just talk a bit about the topic while we wait for the projector and all that. So what is this thing about the economics of nature? I have a little sequence of the global rainfall cycle, which is from the NCR, the National Council for Atmospheric Research in the United States. It's basically a simulation of the Earth's rainfall system. It shows the globe, and it shows, obviously, the Earth rotating from west to east and the winds moving from east to west. And you can see three regions on the planet very clearly. One is the Brazilian rainforest, the Amazon rainforest, an area of 6.7 million square kilometers, twice the size of India, basically. The second region you can see, which is sub-Saharan Africa, green and bright. And the third region you can see is the Indonesian archipelago. And in each of these three regions, you can see the colors. These are colors which are coded, changing from white to orange, every day, morning, night, but slightly out of sequence because the time zone is different. These, my friends, are the three beating hearts of the world's rainfall cycle. For the politicians of this world who keep fighting about territory, for people who want to keep differentiating and drawing lines of divides, let me challenge you to look at that video and tell me, which line do you recognize? There are no lines there. There is one global Earth system, which is basically the rainfall system of this planet. And there are three beating hearts. You may call them the rainfall factories of this planet. The Amazon rainforest and sub-Saharan Africa and Indonesian archipelago, which are generating the rainfall that comes from these forests. Now, the interesting thing is that if you look at that was a picture of the Amazon rainforest. It's absolutely staggering, an area of that size, 6.7 million square kilometers, twice the size of India. If you look at the diagram here, what you see is what is happening, which is that the northeastern trade winds come in, moving from east to west as usual, gathering a lot of moisture over the Amazon rainforest because of evapotranspiration. Something like 20 billion tons of water vapor evaporates from the trees of the rainforest and goes into the clouds and forms clouds as they rise up the Andes Mountains. And then it circulates down lower into the plains and precipitates on Uruguay, on Paraguay, on Argentina, on the state of Mato Grosso in Brazil, which are actually the areas where there is a massive agricultural economy of something like $250 billion per annum, largely food that's grown there, exported to the whole world. So the question that I have for us is, right, so the Amazon rainforest is largely in the state of Amazonas in Brazil, and all of these other states in Brazil and three other countries, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina, are receiving that rainfall, which enables them to have this very productive and profitable economy, which is agricultural production. How much are they paying the state of Amazonas for this essential service of generating the rainfall that feeds their agriculture? Any idea how many billions, hundreds of billions they might be paying for this? Zero, exactly right, sir. They are paying precisely zero. This is the invisible economics of nature. There's huge value being delivered by the Amazon rainforest and its rainfall cycle. There is no price being paid in exchange. Why? Because price is what you pay and value is what you receive. And nature does not send any invoices. When did you last receive an invoice from a bee saying, "Excuse me, madam, pollination services for the month of January"? Or an invoice from Mumbai Borivali National Park saying, "Excuse me, my dear friends from Bombay, all 18 million of you, here is my air cleaning and oxygen generating function service, 100 million crores or whatever it is they want to charge you for." No, that doesn't happen, you see. So nature provides services for free, doesn't charge any invoice, no, it doesn't charge anything for it, provides value but no price. And that's part of the problem. Our mindset as a society nowadays is such, and we are so mesmerized by the magic of markets, especially in a certain part of the Northern American continent, that we fail to understand value unless it is expressed in economic terms. We fail to understand it. It's a failure of understanding, right? Some of us may, and I think all of us in this audience would feel it in our hearts and get it, but systems don't reflect that. Politicians don't get it, CEOs don't get it, CFOs definitely don't get it, and so on. And the net result is that we have decisions being made at a policy level and at an executive level, at the microeconomic level, which are completely oblivious of this huge value that I'm talking about, which is being exchanged all the time, which is the basis of our economy. It is the natural basis of our economy. So this, my friends, is the challenge. And if we look at what all nature provides, this is not just at the ecosystem. I'm talking about big picture ecosystems, right? But there's a smaller picture there, which is the bee pollinating or the plant growing and providing food. So there's a species level as well. And then finally, there's a genetic level as well. And if you see this diagram, and you can look at, on the right-hand side, there are quality dimensions of each of these layers, and there are quantity dimensions. And each of these layers generates what is known as ecosystem services. Now, you may call them gifts from Mother Nature, you can call them ecosystem services, you can call them nature's contributions to people, depending on the politics of the UN Convention for Biological Diversity. But the fact is, these are very valuable gifts that we receive. And it's everything from recreation and water regulation and carbon storage, which is the function of large area forests, all the way to providing food, fiber, and fuel, which is the function, if you like, and the services from species, all the way down to the genetic level, which is medicine discovery. Most of the medicines that we use today were discovered in a rainforest or a reef, or in some way in nature. The molecule was discovered and then replicated to scale in a factory. And that's generated the medicine. So this all originates from nature in that sense. And of course, the ability to have genetic diversity as an adaptive mechanism against disease, against changes in climate and other conditions within which life exists. These are also valuable gifts that we receive. So every layer of nature, be it the ecosystem layer, be it the species layer, or be it the genetic layer, is giving us something. And most of it is for free. And that's part of the challenge. So what I'm going to speak with you today is really on these two questions, which is, what are the insights that we can get when we look at what kind of value would be lost if we lost what nature provides us? And what kind of actions can be taken to prevent that loss, and who should be taking those actions? So I'm going to give you a whole series of examples now. The stories that I'm going to tell you, there are 4 or 5 of them. Each has these two questions that we are trying to address. What's the insight? What do we learn? And who should do something about it, and what should be done? And let me begin with the context, which of course any political community in India which would be addressing this would instantly jump to the conclusion, but you're anti-development. And I'll say, no, I'm not anti-development. I just want development to be multifaceted. And I want it to be focused on the poor, and I don't want more development for rich multi-billionaire businessmen. They don't need it. It's the poor who actually need the development. So I challenge them straight back, saying that I'm talking about development, you're the ones who are not. So let's look at what does the connection between the economics of nature and the lives of the poor. So let's look at what kind of the economy is actually dependent on nature. Well, clearly agriculture, definitely forestry, and of course fisheries. And when we look at the fraction of GDP in the following nations, and we've done this study way back in the Economics of Ecosystems project, we look at the fraction of the economy that relates to those sectors of the economy. The answers across Indonesia, India, and Brazil are respectively 20%, 14% and 10%. So you might draw the conclusion, well, that's not so important. Clearly, the rest of the economy, which is not nature related, is very important. And you could be wrong significantly, because the next question that you should be asking is, who benefits from those sectors of the economy? Because those sectors of the economy, my friend, provide employment to 100 million people in Indonesia, 350 million in India, and in the case of Brazil, especially in the Northeast, 20 million people. So then you have to think, hang on, who benefits from having employment in these sectors, and who suffers? What if the forests die back? What if we don't have the rainfall cycle? What if agriculture suffer? Well, it would be the poor farmer who loses the income to his family and the employment for his family. So it's actually the poor who would suffer in the absence of these services. And the question is, how much? Well, we did those calculations way back in 2010. And we found that if we re-express the question, not as what fraction of the economy is nature-related, but rather what fraction of the rural economy is related to nature, and is the economy of those 100 millions and the 350 million people, those answers are quite different. It's no longer 10%, 14%, and 21%. Now the answers are 75% in the case of Indonesia, for the 99 million people there who depend on that. 47%, so you can say more or less half the income of rural households is nature dependent. And in the case of those 20 million people in northeastern Brazil, 89%, 90% of their incomes are coming from nature. If we destroy nature, we destroy the livelihoods of the poor. Therefore, it is impossible to have development, which is all about improving the livelihoods of the poor, if you insist on destroying the livelihoods of the poor. This would appear to me fairly obvious, right? So this is the first lesson to take from this. Really important to ensure that the livelihoods of the poor are defended and improved. Otherwise, what the hell is the development that you're talking about? Why is this happening? And how do we let this get away? How do we let people get away with it? And how come economists and great policymakers keep making these mistakes again and again and again? Well, the problem is what economists call externalities. And I call it somewhat different. I call it public losses, private profits. And let me illustrate with an example from Thailand. This is an actual study that was done by one of my gurus, Professor Edward Barbier, many years ago. And what he evaluated was basically the choice between, in South Thailand, shrimp farming or leaving the mangrove forests as they are. And if you look at it from a classical economics lens, that's what you'll conclude, that 1 hectare of shrimp farming will generate about $9,800 or $9,600. Sorry, my eyesight is not very good, so I can't actually read the numbers. I'm trying to remember what they are. So $9,800 of profits. And whereas if you just left the mangrove there, you would got probably about $600 worth of fuel wood from there. But hang on. You're forgetting that actually shrimp farming in Thailand is subsidized by the government. So those profits actually are mainly subsidies. About 8,600 of those are subsidies. So the real number is more like comparing $1,200 to $600. That's not very impressive. But actually that's not the full truth either. Because if you say that I've done shrimp farming and within 5 to 6 years, the area that is used for shrimp farming has become completely useless because of salt deposition and chemical deposition. So actually I can't even use it for shrimp. It becomes something that you have to restore. And there's a huge cost of restoration of the order of about $9,000 per hectare. So then you end up with a different picture, which is not plus, it's actually a minus $9,300 for the shrimp farming. And on the other hand, the mangrove forest has provided, during the time that it was allowed to be, protection of the coastal areas against storms and cyclones, which are increasing in intensity as the climate changes. And the value of that was calculated by Ed Barbier along coastal areas at something like $10,000. And if you add to that the service of the mangrove as a nursery for fish, because 1/4 of all fish actually are born literally in those areas. And if you include also things like what the local community gets from forests, as in harvesting timber, fuel wood, and so on, that answer is something like $12,000. Now look at the difference between a calculation, which is what a typical policymaker will see, which is this: oh, let us promote shrimp farming, versus a calculation which includes the invisible economics of nature, which is a completely different answer. In fact, the exact opposite. This is how much difference this insight can make, if only it is provided before you make these decisions and not too late, sometime after. So I talked about fisheries, and fisheries is an area where there is a huge problem. So one of the issues with fishing is that we are depleting fisheries. A significant part of the global fisheries are already depleted, and something like 10% of the fisheries have actually completely gone. Another 40% are close to depletion, and the remaining half are actually getting worse and worse, at a point where if we continue business as usual, by 2050, which is a typical horizon that economists calculate, actually we will be ending up fishing down the food web in such an aggressive way that pretty much we are left with eating not the kind of fish that we enjoy, but basically, the krill and stuff like that that is left. Now, what is the challenge here? Which is that half of the fisheries, as I said, have been depleted. Another challenge is lost productivity, and that's happening basically because, I'll explain in a moment, the scarce resource here from an economic standpoint is actually the fish. But instead what we are doing to solve the problem, we're giving more funding and subsidies to the trawler fleets to go and fish further and fish deeper and actually exacerbate the problem. So Zareen, you will find this astonishing, but this is what we do. You're an economist. But this is how we turn things upside down and basically ignore the scarce resource and in fact create conditions and policies which actually add to the scarcity rather than reduce it. And here's some statistics on this topic from the World Bank. The graphs that you should look at, one is the line of squares that is going from the bottom left to the top right. That is the increase in fishing capacity. But on the other side is the line which you can see, which is going from the bottom right, from the top left to the bottom right, which is the actual catch per unit capacity of fishing. So the catch per unit capacity has been declining sharply, and the fishing capacity has been simultaneously being increased through more and more subsidies for building bigger trawlers and so on. So the net impact is actually nothing. In fact, there's a net loss. And that loss in productivity, which has been estimated by the World Bank as something of the order of $50 billion. Now, how significant is that? The industry overall is about 100 billion, 90 or $100 billion industry. So there's a massive productivity loss that we are suffering simply by having this lack of lens on, again, the invisible economics of nature. Is there a solution? Curiously, yes. And let me tell you a very interesting story which I heard directly from the scientists and the policymakers who actually were involved in that. So the root of the story is that if you only allow female fish to just be there and remain and not fish them before they are big enough to be productive, a female fish typically twice the size, it's a geometric progression, will lay between 10 to 100 times as many eggs. So the answer is to allow the female fish to continue to not fish them out when they're tiny, but to let them be so that they can grow and lay more eggs, and there will be more fish as a result of that. Now, one of the officers of the US Fish and Wildlife Service was working in the area which is known as Cape Cod. That's a funny little L-shaped peninsula that you see on the left-hand side somewhere between US and Canada. And the problem that he was trying to solve was that the haddock catch, cod is already finished in there, and this I'm talking about in early 90s. And to prevent the haddock catch from going the same route as the cod, he and the US Fish and Wildlife Service decided to impose protected areas. So they did in Georges Bank these two protected areas, the kind of triangle which is pointing to the left and the triangle which is pointing upwards. These are the two protected areas that they created, which basically banned fishing vessels from entering that. Now, as you can imagine, as soon as you tell a fishing community you can't go there, you become the enemy, public enemy number one, right? And that's exactly what happened to this gentleman called Andrew Rosenberg, Dr. Andrew Rosenberg. So this is a photograph taken by Andrew himself from the hotel room in which he was holed up for many days because there were trawler fleets and fishermen protesting outside, refusing to let him leave his hotel. And that little circle out there is an effigy of Andrew, which they've hung by the neck from one of the trawlers, right? So this was the reaction of the trawler fishing fleet to the decision by the US government driven by Mr. Rosenberg, so Dr. Rosenberg. What actually happened? This is interesting. Now we get to the science, right? So it's nice to look at facts once in a while rather than opinions. So these are the facts. These are satellite images of how much time trawlers spend. Every trawler's got to keep an instrument on its ship, which tells where it is and what speed it's moving at. In other words, how much time it's spending in a location and how fast it's moving. So these are standard things that every trawler has to carry and report in, otherwise they are illegal. So the blue dots basically are, vessel hours between 1 to 6 hours, and the deeper colors dots like green, yellow and all, it means vessels are spending more time. And you can see that, you can just begin to notice even at this level of detail that, hang on, what is this red line against the Georges Bank 1 area? So let me show you a more detailed satellite picture of the same numbers, of the same space. Here's what it is, right? So the same fisher folk, the same trawlers who said that this is a lousy idea to have protected areas, are spending most of their time and collecting most of their catch from the edges of those same protected areas. What do you think is happening there? You know what? The Fish and Wildlife Service forgot to inform the fish that this is a protected area, right? Yeah. So obviously, they walk out, they swim out from that area, and sure enough, the trawlers pounce on them, catch them, and because that's where they are reproducing, that's where the stocks are the best. So the trawlers, by their own actions, have shown that they're lying when they protest in the European Commission and in the US and so on and so forth. I actually shared these slides many years ago with the European Commission, and I'm happy to report that actually that was one of the reasons why they managed to actually convince the fishing communities, which were constantly protesting in Brussels, to actually reduce their level of protest. So I think I've done some good in my life, indirectly, as a result of that. So this is true. The protected areas, what's known as MPAs, marine protected areas, right? One of the results from the global conference that happened recently, which is the UN CBD COP15 conference in Montreal recently in December, was that they agreed to increase marine protected areas from a level of about 8%, which is what 8% of ocean areas, all the way up to 30%, 30%. That's a very ambitious target. It's laudable. But of course, it's only a target. Nobody is going to force them to achieve it. They have to pull their will together, and people like us have to keep pushing them. I'm glad to see Devi in the audience here and many others who are in the space of activism. So there's work ahead. This is still work to be done. Targets are targets. There's no compulsion to meet the targets. People like us have to push it to make it happen. My next story for you about, again, the invisible economics of nature and what is a problem and what could be a solution is on food. Now, everyone knows everything about food, right? So who am I to be talking about it? But the sad thing is that this picture represents what most people, if you like, on the street, I know that this audience is very educated, but most janta, if you like, tends to think of food as, okay, you plant the seeds, you use some fertilizers, plants grow, you harvest them, and you get grain and fruit and vegetables, and if you have animal husbandry, you also get some milk and meat. But that's actually a very small part of the picture. Again, that's the visible part of the picture. Let me share with you some of the invisible part of the picture. It gets a bit more complicated, right? Because now you have to look at all these other aspects of food systems, which is what is coming to the food systems from the world of biodiversity, nutrients, fresh water, all of the protection that good ecosystems provide to enable plants to grow. And what's coming from the food systems to nature is destruction, is pesticides, is fertilizers, is the loss in soil bacterium and the loss in fertility of the soils and the drawing away of too much water for the production of that food. So there's a huge damage infliction. Again, all of this is invisible. There's no bill or invoice that flows from the food system, from nature to the food system or vice versa. This is what is actually happening, and these are the invisible effects, both ways, that are being ignored. And if you look further up, you will find actually similar issues with the human system interacting with the food system. Yes, there are some visible benefits like labor, which come from agriculture to human systems, and something like 33% of all employment is actually in food systems. So that's huge positive benefit. But equally, there's huge investment in food systems coming through everything from machinery to chemical pesticides and fertilizers and so on. So there are numerous flows there, both visible and invisible, which are happening at the same time. So to simplify or to caricature the food system as simply that, which is what most people commonly think about it, is simply incorrect. Food systems are a huge complex of ecosystems and the services they provide and the flows that take place between ecosystems and across areas and what happens on the farm, and then the harvesting and the production and the value chains from food systems and the food and beverage industry and the transportation and the grain transportation. People wonder why there is such a high carbon footprint of transportation. My friends, most of that transportation is big ships which are carrying food grains. So actually, if you think of it from a systemic point of view, it's not transportation that is the cost, it is the food system that's the cost. If you want to work out how much is the impact of the food system on climate, if you include it the same way, if you account for it the same way as you account for a steel maker, which is you include the costs of mining, Then you have to take into account the rainforest in Brazil, which was destroyed to create the land to grow the corn or the soya, which is supposed to feed the cattle, which is then supposed to be transported all the way to the US, maybe even to China. And you have to account for the transportation costs of that. And then the fact that 1/3 of all the food that we produce is wasted, and therefore the climate costs of that. By the way, if you take all food production that's wasted, waste of food is the 3rd biggest emitter after China and the US. If waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter on the planet. How's that? If you account for all that, then food systems are not the official UN 23%, which is basically farming emissions. It's actually 56% of the total emissions. That's staggering, okay? So this is how significant food systems are for the world of climate. When we talk about climate, it's not just energy, it's food and energy that are the key causes of climate change. When we account for all of these invisibles, then we have a bigger problem to solve. But again, it's not just the nature dimension of that problem. Please look at what is happening here. This is a diagram which I drew based as a Venn diagram, which I drew based on statistics available as of 2015, 2016 roughly. So they're about 5 years old, but more or less the ratios are still there. Out of the 7 billion people, almost 2 billion are undernourished because of some nutrient deficiency. Almost 1.9 billion are overweight, and there's an intersection between these. So there are those who are undernourished and overweight at the same time. Why? Because they're consuming carbohydrates, sugar, rice, wheat, and more of the same, right? And then there's 700 million who are obese within the area of overweight. And on the left-hand side, out of the undernourished, there are 800 million who don't get enough food to go to sleep tonight. So they're actually hungry, going to bed hungry, right? My friends, if the food system isn't broken, what is it? This is our global food system. This is what we are delivering today, right? So not only is it a massive environmental problem, it's clearly not serving the need of nourishing people and providing them the basic ingredients for a healthy life. These are some of the statistics that have come out recently. There was a report, a very famous report in 2016, the Global Nutrition Report, which said that today, most of the costs of health are because of food systems, what we eat. Diets are the #1 burden of disease, according to that report, and this is published by a whole host of scientists. Just one outcome of bad food systems and bad lifestyles is diabetes, and diabetes itself is affecting 400+ million people. That's a number that has increased substantially over the last 20 years, and its cost is something like $850 billion, annual health cost of diabetes. Again, a diet-related problem. On top of that, we have got other aspects of, for instance, animal husbandry in India as well as other countries. There is a tendency to use antibiotics to increase yield, milk yield, for example. And that creates antibiotic resistance, which then creates further problems for human health. Then we have herbicides, which are known to be researched and found to have links with cancers. And then there's pesticides, which of course create many problems, but among them is endocrine disruption, which means problems with the human reproductive system. And here's a diagram which showed just for the European Union that the total health costs of food systems and pesticides and fertilizers and some plastics as well, leading to a large area of neurological disorders and endocrine disruptive disorders. The health cost of that for the Europeans is something like 150 billion euros per annum. These are staggering numbers, and people are not connecting this. You know, you are treating the disease as a disease and treating this. You're not looking at the cause, where it came from. It's coming from food, from what you eat and what you eat with the food. And I think these are some of the issues that have to be addressed. I'm not even mentioning the obvious environmental impacts, because to me the human health impacts are so staggering that they just sweep your feet away. So I had a lovely conversation many years ago, I think it was about 2015 or something, with a gentleman called Vijay Kumar Thallam. He was one of the principal secretaries of Andhra Pradesh, and he had just retired, and he had started something called ZBNF in Andhra Pradesh, Zero Budget Natural Farming. It's now known as Andhra Pradesh Community Managed Natural Farming. And he said, Pawan, you're a scientist, right? So shouldn't food systems be about biology, not chemistry? And I just started laughing. I said, yeah, kind of, yes, of course. But this is really so true. We keep thinking that the solution is chemistry. Soil has all the nutrients that it needs to feed plants and has done so for the last at least 1.5 billion years, right? So what's different? We've forgotten certain basics about what should be agriculture, and the fact that the reason why plants are not getting the food that they need is because you don't have the bacteria in the soil that are converting all those nutrients into suspensions and molecules, which then can be absorbed by the root systems of the plant, osmosis, and then feed and grow the leaves and stems of the plant. Meanwhile, plants are still exuding 30–40% of the sugars that they make in their leaves into the soil. Why? You think they're stupid? No. They're not stupid. They're just expecting to do that because they want to feed the bacteria which are producing their food. But of course, there are no bacteria to receive that sugar. We've killed them, right, with our pesticides and fertilizers. Now, the thought has arisen up to many people. This is known in different parts of the world as regenerative farming. Some people call it natural farming. The Japanese call it the one-straw revolution, and so on and so on. But basically, the idea is get bacteria back in the soil so that they can do their job of converting the minerals in the soil into the nutrients that the plant needs. And when you do that, firstly, the techniques are simple. Sorry, these are my photographs, so they are not award-winning photographs like you have got in the book that you gave me, but like just to show what it is. The thing on the left is a massive 200-liter drum which contains the following: 10 liters of cow urine, 10 kilograms of cow dung, 2 kilograms of gram flour, 2 kilograms of molasses. And it's been topped up with water and stirred 2–3 times a day for about 3 days. It stinks to high heavens. And by the way, that shoe at the bottom, just for size, is my shoe, so I can withstand the stench, but I wouldn't do it for too long. Yeah. So this is called Jivamritam, and you take that and you literally sprinkle it over the soil, and you do it 3–4 times before the sowing season. The thing on the right is basically seeds which have been coated by a similar concoction, which is called Bijamritam, and this is basically what they use. And the seeds which cannot stand the bacteria in that concoction die, and they of course will not plant them. They'll only plant the seeds that survive, and that's itself a filtration mechanism. These are the kind of simple techniques that they're using, and of course constant mulching. They will grow crops like red gram, black gram, chili, then a lot of maize, then basically fruit trees after that, and others next to that field will be a lot of rice. So essentially, as every crop matures and is harvested, the residue is used for mulch for all of the other crops, and then it repeats in cycles for the whole year. So mulching reduces the evapotranspiration, and this system basically regenerates. It looks like a mess. It doesn't have all of the nice little contours that a typical Western industrialized agricultural complex will have, but it's hugely productive. And my company has actually done a study in collaboration with the local research teams that I must congratulate them for working patchily, but through COVID, to get the primary data to collect for us. We looked at all the 3 eco-agricultural regions in Andhra Pradesh: the dryland region on the bottom left-hand side, the southwestern side. The central kind of area you would recognize as an important part, which is basically the Krishna Godavari basin, which is essentially irrigated area. And then the dark region on the top right-hand side, northeast, is basically the hilly region, the tribal region. So there are 3 kinds of agriculture: what I would call default organic, which is in the tribal region, then heavily high input irrigated in the central area, and then dryland irrigated in the southwestern area. In each of these areas, we compared the yields and profits of small farms using natural farming versus using the dominant, by selecting 2 villages which were predominantly one kind or the other, but close to each other. So we had to select villages which have similar cropping patterns, otherwise you're not comparing apples and oranges, you're not comparing millets and maize. So you selected villages deliberately, 12 villages, 4 in each region, and did the measurements for something like 500 households. And these results are staggering, and this is a quick summary of just the economic results, which is showing you that something like those natural farming villages have got 49% or 50% more profits compared to the others. They grow several times more varieties of nutrition-nourishing vegetables and crops and so on. Yes, the labor cost is higher because they employ 20% more labor. You'd expect that because there's more work to do. But then, is labor a good thing or a bad thing? in a country which is short of jobs, I mean, I would say it is a good thing. So, and of course, as expected, as farmers reduce the amount of chemical-based farming, obviously the use of pesticides and fertilizers drops dramatically. So it just goes down literally 50–70% in this sample, but there are places where it's just gone to zero. So quite an interesting set of results. And then there are benefits on the health side as well. And then there are benefits on the nature side. So these are pictures taken within 1 hectare of a turmeric plot of the various varieties of insects. And these are largely beneficial insects. And then obviously where there are insects, you will get bird life. You can tell by the quality of the pictures that I didn't take the previous ones and I did take this one. But basically, nature has come back. I mean, since my childhood, I've visited these areas about five times in the last few years. I haven't seen dragonflies as much since my childhood. And out here, when you walk, you literally have to do this all the time to get the dragonflies out of your face, basically. And that's a signal that, yes, nature is coming back. And it's coming back because of the nature of the farming that is being practiced. And of course, not only do you have invisible benefits in nature coming back, but you also avoid the invisible costs that I just mentioned, which is all of the costs of endocrine disruption and diseases. So my friends, this is clearly a case of looking at the invisibles, and this community has increased to something like 750,000 farmers who are practicing natural farming in Andhra Pradesh today. This young lady that you see out there is someone who is a scheduled caste, landless laborer, who had the gumption to, from her self-help group, they all do microfinance, by the way, and this is very much a woman-driven initiative in AP. She had the gumption to take a 1 lakh loan to start natural farming. She did tremendously well through the dint of hard work and intelligence, and rose so well within the organization of 9,000 CRPs, community resource persons, that she is now a master farmer. And she's telling this so-called panel of experts, including yours truly, not really experts, she's the expert, we were there to listen. So she's telling us her story in Telugu, and it's being translated to me. And I took this picture and noticed the audience. This young lady, yes, exactly. It's a young lady who is a scheduled caste and landless laborer, woman, with a whole bunch of men sort of gaping in awe as she's telling her story. You can just see and to me, this is actually an image that captures what is possible. Get things right, then you can really get everything right. And with that, I will end with one final small story. Now, since Atul, you launched a book recently on, which we just launched just now, on mining. I thought I would just mention that, it's interesting that I went back to my slide library, and I remember that I'd been speaking with some Indonesian members of parliament about 7, 8 years ago. And this is what I had said to them about mining, because they were questioning. There was the same kind of discussions going on. Is mining good for a country, bad for the country? GDP, what do you do about GDP? I said, yeah, fine, let's work it out. So I literally wrote down all the components of GDP. GDP is measured in 3 different ways. There's a cost-based approach, there's a production-based approach, there's an income-based approach. The one that's commonly used is an income-based approach, and these are the components of GDP. So your statisticians basically calculate GDP as profits, plus salaries, plus net rents, plus depreciation added back, so whatever depreciation on equipment and so on, because that is your contribution to capital goods providers, plus the taxes that you pay to the government, minus the subsidies that you receive from the government. So these are the things that make up the GDP, and you put in an estimate, and then 3 months later you change it, because no estimate is ever right. So that's how GDP is calculated, yes. So I can see the economists are laughing, but this is true, But then I said to them, okay, now let's look at this. So I said, fine, profits, okay, who are your mining companies? This company from Canada, this company from Australia. I said, great, so profits are clearly going to Canada and Australia. Great, well done. What about salaries? Oh yeah, miners don't get paid very much. I said, who gets paid? Oh, all the experts. So all the expats get the big salaries. So where does that go? Again, overseas. Then let's look at the rents. What are you renting? Oh, equipment, fine. So where has it been? Oh, from USA, Germany, and so on. So, okay, great. So you're promoting the economies of, your GDP is growing, but the economic benefit is in Germany and the US. Great, well done. Okay. What else is it? Net interest. Where is the project finance and the Finance for the equipment finance, oh yeah, obviously Deutsche Bank and UBS and so on and so forth. Yeah, great, fun. Switzerland's economy needs some benefit from Indonesia. Why should they be left out? After all, good country. So well done. So you have promoted the economies of Canada, Australia, USA, Germany, Switzerland. What about Indonesia actually? Shouldn't you be promoting Indonesia? Because you are Indonesian MPs, right? They were really wild. I could just see a lot of conversation going on in Bahasa and I couldn't understand anything, but clearly they were excited by this, thumping the table and all that stuff. So yeah, this is the problem. The GDP is a great lens for what it's worth. But please remember, it's not there to measure the real benefit that goes to the local community. The miners are the ones who are the local community. They are the ones who earn the least. And the other thing that goes to the local community is the taxes. But, and there's a big but, unfortunately, most countries do not apply what we call resource taxation for mining, and neither does India, right? We have very low royalties being paid by miners. Doesn't matter whether they are foreign or Indian, or doesn't matter whether it's Coal India Limited or somebody from Australia. So we are not actually getting enough taxes for giving somebody else the benefit of subsoil assets which belong to us. We are the citizens of India. This is our soil and our country. The subsoil assets belong to us, right? We have entrusted them to our government to use well for our benefit. How much benefit are we getting out of it? Or for that matter, how much benefit were my Indonesian friends getting out of it? This is the thought that I leave with you, Atul. I think maybe your book also reflects this anyway. But these, my friends, are some stories that illustrate to you the importance of understanding and acting upon the invisible economics of nature. Thank you.
That was exceptional. Thank you. This was, I don't think any one of us can forget this evening. I think it will stay with us some way or the other, and it will keep coming back to us, some way or the other, all our writing life. And I'm so happy that for me, the takeaway was that slide that you talked about, the Thai shrimp fisheries. And as you move from this side to that side, the hidden costs come out and the picture changes. And that is exactly, for a practicing editor, that's exactly the kind of issue that we deal with, How do we, till the time that the policymaker is aware that it's not just the utility value, and there is a value in conservation, and the conservation value is, the economic conservation value is higher than the utility value, only then would the decision go in favor of conserving something. Now this is the dilemma. We talk about, and since we are talking about Darryl today, Darryl's book on temples or tombs talked about Silent Valley. And we all think that Indira Gandhi took a decision on protecting Silent Valley because she loved nature. And people who have written a biography, people who have studied, Jairam Ramesh's book on her, he says it wasn't an easy decision even for her. Though her heart was for conserving Silent Valley, she went through a process to take a decision to conserve Silent Valley. Now, you have one or two policymakers who take a decision like that, but most policymakers would not take a decision like that. And this becomes important. And for that to happen, I suppose, environmental economists, the rigor and the continuing studies, I think it's getting better and better. But more important, us, and that's how we get into the picture, us journalists, our ability to communicate, our ability to understand and nuance this and communicate this has to improve over a period of time. And you may be happy, the publication that I edit, Monga Bay, India, we are collaborating with INSEE, Indian Society for Ecological Economists, and we have started a series of these workshops. It's just early days, we are making a lot of mistakes, but at least we are starting that so that, that becomes, the conversation starts, and maybe 10 years down the line, there are more people talking, public, journalists, publics, on nuanced discussions on environmental economics. and that's perhaps, that's where the next, trend in environmental journalism perhaps should take. So thank you very much for this fabulous lecture today. There is time for, if you permit, there's time for 2 or 3 questions. Somebody would. Pardon? There's a message on who has a car 4585. I think that has to be moved, or is there a 4585? It has to be moved. So whoever has 4585. 4585. Okay. So, okay. We can take a few questions. Anybody? Yeah, please. Can you move a mic there, please? Please identify yourself.
My name is B.N. Kumar. I am an environment journalist. I read a site called Nat Connect Foundation. Nat Connect is, Nat Nature and Connect. Yes. This was the World Environment Day message, once upon a time said, connect people with nature. That was the 5 years ago World Environment Day message. Our Prime Minister also said the same thing. How much they connect, of course, is a different question altogether. So now, couple of observations. You spoke very well about the economic value and the agriculture, farming sector, etc. I also come from Andhra Pradesh, where we see a lot of prawn culture, fish farming, prawn culture in particular, which are destroying the soil. So, considering, looking at your project, you said about 750,000 farmers are practicing this organic nature farming or whatever. So, do you see a trend changing now? Yeah. Second question, just 2 questions. Yeah. Second question will be on water. This year's World Migratory Bird Day theme is water. And water is one of the most essential things, as you say, for farming, survival also. But in Mumbai, we get water more than necessary. We get rainwater. Yes. The monsoon extends up to almost a bit beyond Diwali. Yet we don't save water in Mumbai and surroundings. Nobody practices rainwater harvesting. Yeah. And the MCAP, Mumbai Climate Action Plan, very beautifully designed and says they are going to have a desalination plant in Mumbai. Entire water that God gives us goes into the sea, and then we are going to have a desalination plant. This is our kind of an urban planning. And while launching the MCAP plan, the then Environment Secretary said, we need to sensitize our district level officers on environment. I think that's the biggest joke. The district officers who either pass UPSC or MPSC examinations, competitive examinations, they are supposed to be well educated, graduates plus, and they have to be sensitized on environment. That is state of affairs in this city.
Yeah. No, he's asking for a comment. So I think the second question first, which is the decisions made. I just find it incredible that people think like that, but maybe not incredible, because if you go back to what made that individual say that we should have a desalination plant, is because he had an expectation of receiving some 5–10% commission from that desalination plant. Whereas rainwater harvesting done by you or me or anybody else in Bombay, how much are they going to pay that guy? You will not go and pay a 5–10% bribe on the value of your rainwater harvesting. So I think there are vested interests and there are personal sort of interests. I'm reminded of the words of another one of my gurus, as Professor Partha Dasgupta from Cambridge, who wrote in a book in 2006, which I read and I laughed a lot when I read that. He says there are 3 kinds of governments. There's utopia, which never happens, the perfect government of the people, for the people, by the people, which does everything right and so on. Then he said there's agathopia, and I was reading his description and saying, well, that's like the UK government. But basically a government more or less that knows what needs to be done and more or less tries to do it, but more or less gets it wrong, except a few times when it gets it right and so on. It's just muddling along, basically, yeah. I think the UK government fits that mold. And then he said there's a third kind of government, which he called cacotopia, which is basically, and those who are familiar with the terms, it's a basic government which basically belongs to the clique and belongs to the people who want to make money out of it, and is not in the interest of the people, exactly the opposite. It's in the interest of a few exclusives. So I'm afraid, my friends, you need to figure out which kind of government you've got. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
No, I think the gentleman behind you raised his hand. Bindu, you had your hand raised? No, okay.
My name is Rahul Singh. I have a personal connect with Darryl, which I'd just like to share with the audience. When I first met Darryl, he had just come back from Cambridge, I think it was. Zareen would bear me out. And I was in charge of the Sunday edition of the Times of India. And I published a few articles of his there. And then I was leaving to go on to another job. And Shamlal, the editor, asked me, you're moving on. Is there somebody we could find to take your place? So I said, there's this young man whose articles we've published, and he'd be ideal. So that is how Darryl met Shamlal, and Shamlal, I think, immediately employed him, liked him straight away. So that is my connection with Darryl. But my question to you is that, we've been talking about environment and how it's gone down all over the year. Isn't the population pressures one of the reasons for this? Because I'll give you a small figure. When we got our independence, I think our population was either 350 or 400 million. Today it's 1.3 billion. Now that's bound to have an effect on forests, the environment especially. So how come you didn't mention the population pressures that the whole world, and especially India, has had to face?
No, their population is definitely one of the drivers. But sir, the thing is, we have to look at it over different time scales. So if you take a 50-year time scale, it is true that population is a key driver. But if you look at the last 5-10 years, which is the kind of area we are seeing most of the damage, the population growth rates in India are like 1.1, 1.2% per annum. But the GDP growth rate is 5-6%. And in China, the population growth is 0.3, 0.4% per annum. But the GDP growth rates there are 7 to 8%. And now it's come down a bit to 5-6%. So actually, it's the GDP growth, the growth in production, basically of goods and services, mainly goods, and the impact that they have on the environment, which has got a multiplier effect of 5 to 7 times more than the population growth rates. So it's not that I'm discounting population. I'm just looking at what I see as the biggest driver of environmental destruction, which is the growth in output and the careless growth in output. You can produce goods and services in a way which is less damaging to the environment or more. I mean, even if you are something straightforward like a cement factory, there are cement factories I know and cement companies I know, actually, sorry, not factories, cement companies I know, which operate and produce something like 0.6 tons of CO2 equivalent, GHG equivalent, per ton of cement, and there are other cement companies I know which operate at 1.2. So there's a range of almost double just for the simple, straightforward things. Portland cement, but depending on how you manage your waste and your energy and where you source the raw materials from and what you do with the output of that and so on, it makes a difference. So actually we have to look at, and here we're talking about 100% different, right? Between operating at a 0.6 level versus operating at a 1.2 level. That's 100% difference between the worst and the best. So yes, population growth matters, but there are other things which matter a lot more than population growth. That's what I'm pointing out. And of course, over 50 years and so on, definitely population has a huge effect, as you rightly pointed out, right? The range of growth between 350 and 1.3 billion, got to account for that. But just look at how much GDP has grown since then. It's actually a multiple of almost 40 times during that period. That's the problem. We are not being able to understand how to manage production in a way that is not damaging to the environment. And yet, green economy principles are sitting out there. I mean, I've written together with another 250 odd colleagues from the United Nations, a whole book on this, sector by sector, going through, covering threadbare every aspect of what needs to be done, right? So there's no shortage of guidance on this. And neither is it a work of genius. I'm the first person to admit that. It's stating the blindingly obvious. But then we are back to the usual problem of vested interest and not wanting to do the right thing.
Meena, and then Karthik, and maybe we can take one more question after that. You, sir. After that, you are third in the list. Meena. You are alone? Okay. Who can stop you here?
Gopi. My name is Meena. I wanted to ask you about the land question. You mentioned the Dalit woman farmer. She's landless. So how do those farmers tackle the question of land in Andhra Pradesh?
Yeah. No, so it's interesting. So the entire natural farming movement in Andhra Pradesh, by the way, Andhra Pradesh, total number of farmers is 6 million. So 750,000 is still like less than 13%, right? So there's work to be done. It's still, but what is happening there is that Vijay Kumar and the RYSS Foundation, which is mainly funded by the AP government, but also by Wipro, they are basically focused on the communities which are built around the self-help groups, which actually Vijay Kumar himself had introduced in the old days when he was secretary for microfinance. So what has happened is that the self-help groups are taking this forward. They are leveraging the social capital, if you like, that has been created by the self-help groups to give ladies like that, even though they are landless and scheduled castes and so on, the simple small loans from that same group that they need to get things moving. And that's the basic model that's happening. Yeah. So some have land, some don't have land. Some lease land, as she has done, right, for the purpose of farming. And they pay. They have, from my various interactions with them, they're very often they are moving away from the old system of giving the landowner 20% or 40% of the output. They say, no, we will ask him how much he wants us to pay. So they will pay X number of rupees, and they would rather pay the rupees because they know they can do better by producing and selling. One of the good things about the natural farming is that people appreciate its quality. They know that they will not get, health problems by having natural food. So the produce in the local market sells better, in the sense the baskets come home empty, as against the non-natural produce, which will have a lot of waste and so on. So they tend to make profits because A, they are using less cost, labor mainly. B, they are selling what they grow in the local market. And C, there's no discount or premium as yet, but there is that sort of sense of like pride in what they do, and they do it well, and that makes a difference.
Yeah. Karthik? Yeah.
Hello, sir. Thank you for the talk, the insightful talk. My name is Karthik. I have two questions. One is taking from the example of the shrimp farming in Thailand. So the utility costs of a project, they seem to give profits to some in a short-term basis, while the ecosystem services, say the mangroves, if there is degradation, the negative costs will happen over a long term. Now, the nature of the society or elections or anything, it's all short term. So it's tuned for that. So where in the system does convincing somebody about environmental economics come into play, that these things, these figures are for 20 years down the line, 25 years down the line?
Yeah, it's not, in that case it's not 25, because it's basically a 6-year horizon. So in 6 years, whatever you started in prawn farming 5, 6, 7 years thereabouts, you'll realize that you can't do it anymore, and then you leave, right? So that's the horizon there. But you're right, that there are other contexts where the horizon can be as much as 25 years. And the challenge here is a fundamental challenge. Is there enough will in the people to push back against vested interests, against corruption, and against government officials who want to do the wrong thing, basically for their purse and not for the benefit of the people? Unless we wake up, nobody is going to help us.
Just a second question. It was about, are there any examples from India or from anywhere in the world where the information about environmental economics was translated into or informed governance, local governance?
Yeah, 100.
Can you share some?
In my own, So log into TEEB, www.teebweb.org, and look for a section which is called TEEB case space, TEEB case studies. You will find 119 case studies there. I know because I checked before I came. So these case studies are all instances, and there are some in India as well, by the way. I mean, there's one which my own friend Pushpam, who was one of the study leaders of the teams, he did a study in near Delhi on the cost impacts of living too close to the Jamna, and there were some policy decisions made locally at that time as a result of his studies. There are quite a few actually, which around the world. I mean, there are literally thousands of examples, but it's pretty scattered, right? So you'll find a lot of these examples are because of local policymakers making the right decision. There are a few outstanding cases at a national level. Costa Rica is a case in point, right? In Costa Rica, way back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they introduced a policy that they realized they had suffered deforestation and the usual problems that come with it. They introduced a very simple policy. They realized that most of the deforestation was coming because of cattle farming, and they calculated what the profits of the farmer was. It was something like $50 per hectare per year, just $50 per hectare per year doing cattle ranching. So they set a price equal to that, saying that if you don't, we will give you $50. That has generated a huge change in the forest cover of Costa Rica, which over 20 years has gone up from like slightly over 20% to just slightly under 50%. Half of Costa Rica is forested, thanks to just one national policy of providing basically payments for ecosystem services. It's called PES, Payment for Ecosystem Services. The payment is for you not destroying your land and for reforest, allowing natural regeneration to take place. You don't do cattle ranching there. You will get paid per hectare. Simple, simple device, national policy. So yeah, there are national policies like that, a few of them, but most of them you'll find are actually local actions by local cooperators, local governments, even smaller level companies. Yeah.
Thank you.
Check out the website. It's got you'll enjoy reading it actually. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, because Team India published a booklet in 2014.
Yeah, recently.
With 14 case studies.
Within India itself.
Within
Correct.
India
Yes.
itself.
Yeah.
I can share that with you, Karthik. You, sir.
Sir, actually,
If you could identify yourself. Yeah.
I am Srinivas Reddy, a senior journalist, retired now. I'm still writing for a few magazines. Actually, ESG is the catchword of corporate world.
Sorry, sir, I can't hear you very well. Can you just speak closer to the microphone?
Okay, I have to. Okay, ESG is the catchword for all the corporates nowadays. Actually, India is had to catch up. But whether it is benefiting in a way, actually in your presentation what you have projected is everything negative is happening for the environment or nature because of the capitalist entrepreneurship and innovation in that. So to what extent it is likely to benefit in the, that means as the people are getting slightly knowledgeable about environment and all these things, whether this is only another red herring or whether it is likely to be a result in any beneficial things, that is one question. And another thing, sir, to a second question, that is another most important thing. Because actually you have seen in US and even in globally, because most of your global, your research is global. Like how Donald Trump has been the US president for some time and no care for any environmental initiative or anything. So whether is there any study relating to how one leader can destroy the direction of the whole environmental initiatives?
I don't think you have to look very far for that.
You must be able to give us some study over the next one or 2 years.
No, I think you just read I mean, we are in the FEJI, the Forum for Environmental Journalists. I'm sure they've written quite a lot on this topic. But no, the reality is that there are issues with policies like happened in the times of Donald Trump. But if you look at the resilience of a democracy depends on how quickly it can bounce back from that kind of pressure. So I'm delighted to inform you that the US and Australia have just teamed up to basically do natural capital accounting for the entire United States of America. So basically they are going to follow the system of SEA, the System of Environmental and Economic Accounting of the United Nations. And better than that, they're even working out the what we know as inclusive wealth accounts for the US. So now this is a change that has been introduced obviously by Mr. Trump's successor, Biden, and his administration. And it's a complete like 180-degree turn from what it was to what it should be. I think we should follow suit. I think we should also say, yep, we like the fact that Australia and the US are doing this. We would also want to do inclusive wealth accounting in India, and we'll get some interesting study results from that, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm Kia. Sorry.
Yeah. Then go ahead, please.
Yeah. Okay, partly answered, but I have to put out a press release.
Please,
I'd like an answer from you. You know, we've been talking about this for years now in the world, over a decade, I think. We've had Amartya Sen and Joseph Stiglitz bring out a booklet on alternative GDP. It hasn't been taken. Right now, you're telling me that the US is doing this accounting.
Yeah.
I am asking you, since you're here in India and there's a room full of journalists, what would you tell the Indian government? What you speak of right now, these are small case studies. We're just working on the fringes. We're too late. It's getting late.
Yeah, it's getting late by the minute, of course. But I mean, it's better to do something late than to never do it. So I think the time has come for us to recognize that if we are serious, and we need to be serious about solving the problems of poverty and productivity, which will get worse with climate. So I don't know how many of you have read this book. It's a novel, it's a science fiction novel called Ministry for the Future. People raise hands who have read it here? Yeah, not enough, just 3, 4 maybe. I recommend reading chapter 1. It's not very long, it's about 25 pages. Yeah? So you can read it on a ride in from home to office. Read chapter 1. That will tell you what will actually happen out here in India. It's written with some solid scientific clarity and an understanding of the local environment. We don't want that to happen, right? Sorry? I forget.
Robinson.
Sorry?
Robinson?
Yeah, Kim Stanley Robinson. Yeah, that's right. Kim Stanley Robinson, Ministry for the Future. Please read chapter 1. That left quite a staggering mark on me when I realized, yeah, this is correct. Everything that he writes about is absolutely possible. And it's in the realm, even though it's described as science fiction, it's actually science fact. So we need to protect the many poor that we have from the ravages of climate breakdown, which is what we are facing now. I am an optimist. I believe the Earth system's resilience has been underestimated. I believe we just need to take our foot off that accelerator towards our own destruction and leave nature be. Nature has an amazing capacity to restore itself and to restitute itself because of its resilience. We are right now testing that resilience, and if you test the resilience past tipping points, you reach states of the environment and of planetary boundaries, you cross planetary boundaries, and then you cannot predict what happens next, because that environment that you are entering is a new phase, right? And that new phase you have no experience of, because you have no idea what it is to live in a world which is 3 degrees hotter than it is today. And yet we are facing that eventuality. So it's time for people to wake up and insist on this becoming a central policy issue. How do we protect, as a big contributor towards climate emissions, as a big provider of intellectual power? I mean, please, I'm proud of my team that I led at the team. There was me as a study leader, and there were 5 other people within us. 2 of the 5 were Indians. That means 3 out of the 6 senior people in this global project were Indians. 50% of the brain power at the top was from this country. I'm proud of that, right? Hardly people even know about this. I mean, the other 2, one is in Bombay. I think Dr. Haripriya Gundimeda, she's somewhere in Bombay right now. The other one is working in the US, Pushpam Kumar, right? So we need to recognize that we have the brains in India to solve our problems. We just need the will to solve our problems. And the time is now.
Okay, last question from Atul, and then after that...
No, actually this is not a question, just I'm grateful to Pawanji that he released my book, and it is in Marathi, Nisarga Kallol, Rajhans Prakashanani kelele. Actually, जोशीमठ आणि कर्णप्रयाग यांनी आपल्याला एक इशारा दिलेला आहे. गेल्या 9 महिन्यामध्ये ही जागा 9 सेंटीमीटरने खचली आहे. आता आपण विचारतो का की पर्यावरण की विकास ही योजना केली तेव्हा खर्च आणि फायदा याचा जेव्हा विचार केला तेव्हा ही खचणारं याचा विचार केला होता का? हे सगळे प्रश्न मला मी 3 वर्षापूर्वी पवन सुखदेव यांची मुलाखत घेतली होती तेव्हा त्यांनी सांगितलेले की आपल्याकडचं जे अर्थशास्त्र निसर्गाचं सांगितलं जातं ते नेमकं कसं आहे. निसर्ग कल्लोळ या पुस्तकामध्ये आपण आता हवामान कल्लोळाकडे चाललेलो आहोत. त्याचे गरिबांना कसे त्रास होत आहेत, शेतकऱ्यांना कसे त्रास होत आहेत, आणि दुसरीकडे निसर्गाची खरवडणूक कशी चाललेली आहे कॉर्पोरेट कंपन्यांकडनं याचा उल्लेख आहे. युरोपमध्ये वैज्ञानिक आणि कलावंत मिळून एकत्र काय काम करतायत, म्हणजे 1962 पासून राशेल कार्सनच्या पुस्तकापासून वैज्ञानिक आणि कलावंत एकत्र मिळून लोकांना सांगतायत, मुलांना सांगतायत, म्हणून तिकडं ग्रेटा थुनबर्ग सारखी मुलगी आंदोलन करू शकते. हे सगळं या पुस्तकामध्ये, आणि राजहंस प्रकाशनातर्फे आलेलं चंद्रमोहन कुलकर्णी यांचं मुखपृष्ठ असलेलं हे पुस्तक बाहेर ठेवलेलं आहे. वन्स अगेन थँक्यू पवनजी.
Thanks, Atul. Now to have the formal vote of thanks, can I invite P.K. Das of the Participatory Urban Design and Development Initiative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sukhdev. It's been just most wonderful talk from you, illuminating and highly inspiring. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will not get into talking more about the subject that Mr. Sukhdev talked about and the discussions that followed. A bit about Darryl. I think that's necessary to speak about and leave the hall with memory of Darryl. Darryl was a very dear friend. It's difficult for me to accept, after more than 3 years of his passing, that he's no more. For he had much to share, write, guide, participate, and support human and environmental cause, and cause for justice. Darryl's role as an activist is noteworthy, and I'm going to be talking a bit about his role as an activist. For many years, I've had the privilege to work closely with him, and I've learned enormously. He was on the forefront of participatory citizens' movements for the democratization of public spaces, and the waterfronts in particular. Along with the residents of Carter Road in Bandra, he established the Bandra West Residents Association, called the BWRA, and thereafter the Celebrate Bandra Trust, which really took off after the project of reclaiming the waterfronts at Carter Road and its redevelopment as a public space. And the activities under the trust has significantly enabled the reunion of the people of Bandra and restore their neighborhood identity. I think that was the most important outcome of the movement in Bandra. And this is such an important phenomenon to restore neighborhood identity and reunion of the people of a neighborhood in a city which is constantly across the country is breaking down the relationships between people in so many different ways, as much as it's actually separating the relationships between people and nature. Darryl actively participated in several campaigns and protests in the city to protect the vast and the rich extent of mangroves, wetlands, rivers, creeks, forests from abuse, misuse, and their rampant destruction for the promotion of unsustainable mega projects. He campaigned very actively against the Coast Road, which is fast being built across the western coastline of Mumbai. The various waterfronts development, including the making of the popular promenade along Carter Road waterfront and the protection of the mangroves there, has drawn international attention, inspiring individuals and various neighborhood organizations to take up the cause of their respective area open spaces. Needless to say, how critical these issues are for the health and quality of life of Mumbaikars and the city. He worked closely with Bandra Bandstand Residents Trust, which is a neighbor, the area beyond the Carter Road in Bandra, another citizens movement in the Bandstand area, and regularly met and stood in solidarity with the citizens there. As a result of these movements, over 3 kilometers of the coastline in Bandra got protected from vandalism, places that had been turned into filth and abuse and considered as the dumping grounds or the backyards of the city for garbage and debris dumping. Similarly, he supported the neighborhood people of Juhu in their struggle for saving the iconic beach from abuse and misuse there. His role as an activist is notable in several other significant movements in Mumbai and around Mumbai, and I'll just very quickly sort of list them out rather than getting into the details of them. For those who would know and may remember, Darryl fought a significant battle against the proposal of the Government of India to build the headquarters of the National Institute of Bank Management off the shore on Carter Road, in the waters of the coastline of Bandra, almost close to the Otters Club, but beyond that, in the waters. And he, together with the Save Bombay Committee and Mr. Kisan Mehta then, fought this battle against its construction, and it forced then the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to intervene and shift the building of the headquarters to Pune. With BAG, Sham Chainani, Navroz Modi, Rally Jacob, and others of the area in Alibag, Darryl organized protests leading to relocation of a fertilizer and chemicals plant which was proposed to be built on the coastline of Rewas and Mandua. He was closely associated with Girni Kamgar Kriti Samiti, struggle for the mills and the workers' justice, led by Datta Ishwalkar, Praveen Ghag, Meena Menon, and others. This led him to publish one of the most authoritative books on the subject, titled Ripping the Fabric. He was a member of Mumbai Nagarik Vikas Manch, which was a forum of several city-based organizations that had organized protests across the city on several issues such as Rent Control Act, protection of public spaces, the land use plan, the development plan of the city, and so on and so forth. But the most important, the most immediate to Carter Road was a big protest which he joined in against Zeng Dong, a ship that got stuck in the waters of Carter Road. And soon a few entrepreneurs jumped in to get permission from the government to turn the ship into a flotel. And with an excuse of building a flotel off Carter Road, they started encircling a large stretch of land on the waterfronts at Carter Road and privatized the same for fun and entertainment and for commercial interest. But he quickly led the protest with Mumbai Nagarik Vikas Manch, which constituted members as Nivara Haq, Girni Kamgar Kriti Samiti, many citizens organizations, etc. And that led to a Rasta Roko protest at Carter Road, which then everybody was arrested, etc., etc. And then it went into a big campaign and a court intervention. And finally, the High Court ordered the demolition of the ship within 15 days to be cut into pieces and removed from Carter Road. And that then led to the citizens' movement at Carter Road to reclaiming the waterfronts and developing a significant and most popular waterfronts promenade at Carter Road. Darryl, I can just go on listing a few others, but just to cut it short, these are some few notable movements he was spearheading and very actively engaged with. He had this magical quality in him of drawing people together. I think that was really in the most unassuming way. Darryl was affable, approachable, warm, and genial. A man having reached such distinguished heights had no pretension. He was simple, open to meet and listen, rare these days, with dominating air of impatience and verbosity. He made every person comfortable to talk and interact with him, but never minced his words. He was a man of principles and enduring honesty. On a lighter note, Darryl loved his drinks. Once Darryl and I had a fabulous trip together to São Paulo in Brazil by invitation from the London School of Economics. This was a conference by the Urban Edge Awards of the London School of Economics. And I remember Mr. Charles Correa and Mrs. Monica Correa here also being there in the same conference. We were on this trip gulping with the first opportunity a variety of caipirinhas, as most Brazilians do. Try cachaça with mashed cashew fruit to make a delicious caipirinha. And truly, try that when the season of cashew fruits come in. I and my wife, Brathati, were touched by Darryl's warmth and caring friendship. We are equally moved by the warmth and hospitality of his wife, Zareen, an economist turned psychoanalyst, his son, Samir, daughter-in-law Rinka here, and his loving grandson, Abhir, who is fun to be with. Hey, we are very happy to have you all with us here. Darryl was a trustee of the Mumbai Waterfront Center and Participatory Design and Development Initiative, PUDI. Today, on behalf of PUDI, I'm honored to join the Forum of Environmental Journalists in India, which Darryl founded. Mumbai Marathi Patrakar Sangh and Mumbai Press Club to host the first Darryl de Monte Memorial Lecture. On behalf of the organizers, including from, if I may take the liberty, Zareen, to include the de Monte family, in expressing our sincere thanks to our close friends, Mr. Rafiq Elias here, in particular, and Bhima Mohite, for their unstinting support and contribution in designing the invitation, the backdrop that you see here, and other display matter for this event. We thank the staff of Mumbai Patrakar Sangh, Mumbai Press Club, for the various arrangements to make this evening function a success. Lastly, but most importantly, we are deeply honored, Mr. Sukhdev, and privileged to have you, an eminent environmental economist of international repute, to have kindly accepted our invitation to deliver this first Darryl de Monte Memorial Lecture. A big thank you, Mr. Sukhdev. As I said in the beginning, for the most inspiring and most illuminating talk on such a critical and important subject, and so simply put forward to us. The communication that you made has been truly inspiring, and it really remains a challenge for us to take it forward. With a big thank you to all of you here, we close today's session. Thank you very much. Thank you.